Well, first of all, I'm Scudder Mackey. I'm the Chief of the Office of Coastal Management with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And on behalf of the state of Ohio, Governor DeWine and ODNR Director Mary Mertz, welcome to Ohio. We're really pleased to have this conference. As Gail had mentioned, harmful algal blooms are a significant issue that impact the state, both in terms of public health and safety, but also economically. And having you here today is going to help guide perhaps some of the investments that we make down the road to address this problem. One thing I do want to say is that the fundamental reason why we're here is on this slide. And basically what we're looking at is the pre-settlement distribution of wetlands, the Great Black Swamp. And I know Bill has published numerous articles and pieces on this. And if you look at the lower right-hand side of that slide, that's basically what we're at today, at least in 2000, and it hasn't significantly changed. So we've had a significant loss of wetlands in the state of Ohio by more than 90% by acreage. And we've also seen significant replumbing of the system, and that is as the wetlands were converted to agriculture, the tributaries and drainage channels were straightened in order to move water off the landscape as quickly as possible. And this is in part the reason why we see increases in nutrient loads. It's not only the fertilizer and the manure that we spread on the fields, but it's also the altered flow regimes that we see in our water systems, where we're moving much more water off the landscape much more quickly. And in these western basins, the area that Gail showed on her map earlier, these systems are very flashy. In other words, the amount of nutrients going is directly proportional to discharge. These are not base flow dominated systems with respect to hydrology. So the important thing to remember that it's not just managing what we put on the landscape, but also managing how water moves through the landscape. And this is where wetlands can be a really important factor, because wetlands retain water, they store water. They also have the potential to process nutrients. And so the state of Ohio was very much interested in making investments to restore not only coastal wetlands, but also riparian wetland systems, pass-through systems that can actually trap sediments, reduce turbidity, improve water clarity, and also trap nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, and process those nutrients. In terms of some recent changes, and I think many of you are aware of this in Ohio, we obviously have a new governor, Governor Mike DeWine. We have a new administration. They, I believe, started at mid-January, I think is when the transfer occurred. We're still learning a lot of things, but one of the major policy initiatives that Governor DeWine is in the process of implementing is called the H2 Ohio Initiative or Fund. And his proposal was basically to commit $900 million toward water quality improvements in the state of Ohio over the next 10 years. And so, which is really significant, obviously. When do we have money to do this type of thing? And with an initial, in the first biennial budget, an initial request of about $100 million. The legislature moved through, I think people understood the significance of the investment, of this investment. So we had a little delay in the General Assembly in terms of getting the budget passed in Ohio. We didn't get it. It was supposed to be done by July 1st, and it was done, I think, in the middle of July. So we had a couple of weeks of a delay. But I'm pleased to report that at least for the first biennial budget, which is for the next 2 years, starting July 1st, we have $85 million allocated toward water quality improvements in the state, and these are dollars that have to be spent over the next 2 years. And I'm also pleased to report that $46.2 million are allocated to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, with a focus primarily on investing in coastal wetland and upland wetland restoration, creation, and enhancement projects, with a focus on nutrient reduction and water quality benefits. So this is really a huge deal here. We have never had these types of resources available to us before. It's always been very difficult to get funding for wetland restoration. GLRI has done a reasonably good job, but these are relatively small projects and they're sort of scattered about. I think here we have a unique opportunity over the next several years to make investments at scale, at a size where I think we can make a measurable difference in the loadings that are coming down through the Maumee River and the Sandusky rivers. And also, we have the derivative benefits, which are, of course, for many of us, as important, and that is the habitat benefits, the fish and wildlife habitat benefits, waterfowl benefits. So what I want to do is give you an idea of the types of projects that, at least on a preliminary basis, we have identified. This is the mouth of the Maumee River, all right? The Maumee River mouth has been significantly altered, both hydrologically, but also in terms of its geomorphology and function. Entirely armored, dredged on an annual basis, about 1.5 million cubic yards or so, actually about 800,000 cubic yards a year, 1.5 million for the entire state of Ohio. And what we have proposed to do, Ray had mentioned, well, gee, a lot of the wetlands that we construct are more for habitat, different type of functional benefit. We have 3 projects that we've identified here. One at Cullen Park, one we call it the Grassy Island Project, and then it's a CDF3 project. That's a confined disposal facility where dredge material is placed, that sort of rectangular box out there, artificial construction by the Corps of Engineers. We have designed, at least at Cullen Park, but working on 2 other projects. These are flow-through wetland projects where water coming down through the mouth of the Maumee River will actually flow through these wetlands. And these wetlands are going to be specifically designed to trap sediments and process nutrients. The engineering and design work actually for Cullen Park is done, and also in part for portions of the CDF3 wetland. Grassy Island we're spinning up right now, and we actually have grant agreements in hand that soon will be going out. Port of Toledo will be the project manager for that, and these projects will be moving forward probably within the next month to month and a half. We will be using H2 Ohio funds for these projects. This is really significant. Another reach of shoreline. This is another area or geography. This is basically the northwest, Western Basin shoreline, basically from the Toot St. River up through Little Cedar Point. And it's along this reach of coastline that we have many of the existing coastal wetlands in Ohio. And many of these wetlands are dike wetlands. There are several people from ODNR here. Dave Sherman, and he's sitting over there. Just raise your hand. He's with our Ohio Division of Wildlife, and he's responsible and oversees management of many of these wetlands. There are at least a couple other people I see. I see Janice Kearns here. Janice is the reserve manager for the National Estuarine Research Reserve, one of the 2 reserves, aquatic reserves in the Great Lakes. She's just a couple miles to the east here in Huron. And then we have Christy. Hi, Christy. Are you sitting over there? Yep, she's the researcher at Old Woman Creek. So I would encourage you to speak with these people. They're with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. I don't know, is anybody else from ODNR here? Okay, hey, I didn't see you back there. Okay, but these are all folks. Have a conversation with them. Ask them what they're doing and what we're thinking with respect to these H2 Ohio investments. But anyways, looking at these wetland complexes, Ray, you talked about the dike wetlands. We have allocated dollars to go ahead and put in hybrid innovative fish access and water control structures, not only to reconnect these systems to the lake, but also on the upstream sides to take the agricultural runoff when it's appropriate to do so and actually have them flow through these wetlands to try to restore some of the water quality benefits and functions that we would typically see. We go down to Sandusky Bay, and you notice in that satellite image that Gail showed, you saw in just a couple days ago that big red blob over there, but you saw that double little yellow spot down there in Sandusky Bay. What you need to know is that the harmful algal blooms in Sandusky Bay are a different type of critter. It's planktothrix, it's nitrogen limited, and those guys actually start up earlier in the season and they persist longer than in the Western Bay itself, and they produce microcystin toxins as well. And it turns out that for those guys, the important things is water clarity. These things thrive in turbid water. So part of the work that we're doing is to design a series of wetland complexes in Sandusky Bay that will reduce sedimentation, also phosphorus, and nitrogen, because we have the phosphorus reduction targets, but also to start to improve water quality and water clarity in Sandusky Bay. We've developed a three-dimensional hydrodynamic EFDC modeling code that actually predicts water movement through the system. It also has nutrient processing components, which we evaluate the effectiveness of various wetland designs in terms of location, size, how it affects the flow of water, how it affects water retention time, so that we can actually model and predict and help guide the design of these wetlands to maximize the functionality for nutrient reduction and improvement in water clarity. So this isn't just, oh, we're just going to throw a couple acre wetland out here. We're talking with the investments that we just talked about here, we're talking about restoring or enhancing up to 5,000 acres over the next several years if we implement all of these projects. Now that's a significant change. It's probably going to take us longer than 2 years to get that done. But what we're looking at, if the legislature moves forward and approves the $900 million, they will have continuing funding for the next decade to continue making these types of investments to get us to where we want to be. This is an example. This is Sandusky Bay, and this is just a conceptual map. But one of the things that's really important is that we're not doing these projects as single isolated projects. There's an underlying framework and strategy that links these projects together. It's called landscape conservation design, where if you just conceptually look at Sandusky Bay, the complex here, that geography, water moves from left to right. It moves from the mouth of the Sandusky River through the bay, through the Edison Bridge, and then out past Cedar Point into Lake Erie, okay? So the idea is that we design a series of wetland complexes so the water moves from one to the next, to the next, to the next. It's like a giant stormwater treatment train. And that's the approach that we're taking here in Sandusky Bay. This is not a set of random projects that just pop up through an RFP process. We have designed these projects, at least the location of these projects, to perform very specific functions so that the cumulative benefits will allow us to reach our goals, which is basically the elimination of harmful algal blooms in Sandusky Bay and a 40% reduction in phosphorus loads, which we're required to do by agreement. And then finally, what I want to show you is that we do a lot of work separately with the beneficial use of dredge material. It could be beach nourishment, but we also do in-water wetland creation, and we're looking. This is a list of potential projects. There's, I think, 39 or 40 of them here. The area that we were looking at, let's see if that, right in here, this is Sandusky Bay. The Maumee River mouth is here. But the green dots basically are looking at potential sites where we can do wetland restoration along the coast. And these are tied in with what we call nature-based shorelines, but we're also looking at embayed and protected areas to beneficially use dredge material, the fine-grained material, clean sediment. We basically place it, and then it's vegetated. We usually have a low-relief retaining structure, and this is in the coastal systems. And finally, we're also thinking similar thoughts up into the watersheds. We are still working through the process of identifying the potential investments and projects that we're going to fund. The work and the discussion that we have here today, we believe will help guide us in terms of those types of projects that we may want to invest in. There's nothing let's say, locked in concrete right now. We are adaptive and we are flexible. One thing we want to make sure of is that the projects are successful as much as possible. And the other thing that this administration has made very clear, the investments that we make here, we're accountable for those investments, which means we're also investing in the monitoring and assessment work that needs to be done, pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction to actually document the nutrient reduction benefits and water quality benefits of these projects. We want to make sure that the investments, the taxpayer investments we make actually produce. And that's basically where we are. Thank you.